Welcome to Talk Politics, the only show where you don't just watch the news, hear it, listen to it, but help make it. Hey, think of it like this. We're coming to you every Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. You can join us for conversation amongst friends about politics. The format's like this. We'll cover questions asked in our public Talk Politics group, cover the big things that are going on nationally. I'll add commentary, and then we'll conclude by discussing state politics. So if you want to help us with our mission and help foster civil discussion amongst friends, go to ko-fi.com/Reichenbach Media. I'll put that in the chat there for you. But make sure to go ahead and do that. Help us out. Buy us a cup of coffee so we can keep the conversation going. In the meantime, let's get to the people, find out what it is that people are out here really talking about. So, pulse of the people on Talk Politics, what it is that we have people talking about here in our Talk Politics page. Today, well, actually, we'll jump back in time. I mentioned cannabis is a non-addictive mood enhancer, or is it? What are your thoughts on legalizing cannabis? Well, at this point, we really didn't have many thoughts about legalizing cannabis. Mr. Kenny Cody mentioned he's for decrim. And I said, yeah, we should most definitely have federal decriminalization and to let the states decide. What are you guys' thoughts? Do you think the state should decide, or do you think we should just keep it out of society altogether? What I wondered is, why is it that Republicans, if they do support federalist policies, why don't they leverage the issue in more suburban and swing districts? Seems like they'd have a lot more time, a lot easier time picking up more potential voters in those suburban areas just by merely supporting the free market and letting states choose. That's an issue that they could go door to door with and be, heck, a little more up on the times. As it stands now, if so many people really making the GOP really a GOP, too old for so many people's taste. But if you're in the chat, hey, we welcome you. We're just taking the post of people talking about what we're talking about in our Talk Politics group. Looking forward to hearing from you guys and your opinion. What do you guys think? Legal cannabis, yay or nay? Personally, I think you should, at the very least, should be decriminalized, but hey, potentially even legalized. We also talked about Zelensky's address to Congress. in the opinion of the Ukraine war. And we asked, how much did it change your opinion? Said it didn't change my opinion at all, or something else. We had nobody say that it changed their mind. And so therefore, just hey, Chet, good to hear from you. Nice talking to you. And hey, happy to have you here. I hope that you participate in the Talk Politics group, because I know how involved you are and how passionate you are about these issues, particularly things perhaps even about the war. The Ukraine war, according to the Post, the people, our opinion was not changed by Zelensky being invited to Congress. Here's what people actually said. Well, that the news doesn't cover, or heck, even take much into consideration. Mr. Cody said, confirm my beliefs. He's nothing but a grifting, wannabe authoritarian making the rounds around the world to make money instead of being in this war-torn country. Isn't that a luxury for Mr. Zelensky to travel around the world? Hey, I get to go in front of Congress. I get to make a big appeal. I get to be a big hero. You know, it's often the case now that every politician and all the other people out there want the opportunity to play the hero, but how often are they actually really willing to be the hero? Because in this case, I would think, for example, that Ukrainians, and particularly what I really mean is Mr. Zelensky, could be the real hero by negotiating a peace settlement with Russia. Instead, he gets to go through, play with our military weapons, use them in a war that benefits them, quite frankly, more than us. And for what? For what? Mark says, hey, well, the Me Too generation contributes nothing. No accountability for money at all. And we have one gentleman suggesting, hey, my opinion on the matter is unchanged. My leanings on the matter favor Ukraine, a corrupt state in its own right, but the Russians were the aggressors. I favor some kind of aid, but it sure would be swell if our NATO allies would pony up. The aid to Ukraine should have been in a separate bill, for sure. How many different bills do we have to pass that has Ukraine funding? Or why did we just decide to wedge it all in this one bill? Well, why do we have to wedge so many things into one different bill? I've heard no single citizen say, you know what? I'm really proud of the United States because they put so many different things in a big fat bill that people don't read. You know, then that just doesn't exist. Let's cancel that. Put more things in a separate bill. You don't need these fat bills that people can't read. On Christmas, we asked, hey, what's on your political wish list? And we got quite a bit of stuff here. We got a new president, a revolution. I don't know what that means. Well, how are we gonna have a revolution? I think perhaps the most revolutionary thing we could go back to is people and politicians understanding what it is that the Constitution says by not only reading the Constitution, but reading the document that justifies the Constitution in the Federalist. That would be a real revolution. Yeah, pork spending will always feed hungry politicians, and I know that you know that from firsthand experience, Mr. Dillon. I know that's tough out there for sure. Yeah, we got to do more to cancel the vast spending. Because it's not just an issue of spending in and of itself. It's an issue of, do the people really know where any of this money is going? Ask an ordinary person on the street if they've ever really seen or understand where the federal spending is going, and I'm willing to bet that 75% of them will say no. Now, isn't that to some degree a failure of members of Congress to do their congressional duty? It says in the Federalist, I believe Federalist 10, that representatives have a duty to refine and enlarge public opinion. Now, it seems like instead what they'd rather do is refine and enlarge the administrative state in these vast, fat budgets. Absolute garbage. For our wish list, we got one person mentioned justice. Not sure what that means. That's pretty broad. If the suggestion is that there was some kind of voter fraud, or that the 2020 election didn't go the right way, well, those things aren't going to be overturned or changed anytime soon. Another gentleman mentioned Mitch kicked out as minority leader and replaced with Harmeet Dillon as new RNC chairman and DeSantis as president in 2024. That's all. I believe that I liked that comment, but as I mentioned before, I don't think it's clear that just having a new RNC chairman is automatically going to make it the case that the RNC is what drives votes and drives conversation. I don't think a central planning committee is going to really be able to help anybody win elections for that matter. If they could, why hasn't the RNC done more to help people in the past? Why haven't we been able to succeed with them before? I don't think it's just a matter of the RNC not having money. I just don't think that, functionally speaking, any big organization is in a big or in the right situation to automatically get people across the finish line. I've also been thinking a lot about the DeSantis situation. I think it's really worth thinking about. Now people are so disgusted or disappointed in the rhetoric of our former president Donald Trump that they now want to go to DeSantis. Okay, great, fine enough. But is it the case that we have any guarantee that DeSantis is going to be more like Ronald Reagan in the good ways and more like the good things about Trump, or is it going to be the case that he's going to be tempted to do the bad things that Trump did? And listen, most of Trump's policy was good, but it's the way that his rhetoric really caused a good amount of electoral harm. So do we have any guarantee that DeSantis isn't going to emulate the bad elements of Trump? Or do we have any guarantee that he's going to be anything like Ronald Reagan? We don't. We don't. I think people should really think more carefully following the election of Donald Trump, but about just throwing their blind support behind somebody. I don't think that works. So there's a lot to think about. We don't really know what DeSantis is going to do. We don't know what most presidents are going to do, I guess. Aside from Biden, who is basically president once. But we don't know. And so the public should really insist on a lot more vetting of DeSantis before we just assume that, oh, hey, this is going to be the man that's going to turn things around. We don't know, man. We really don't know. But the people also weighed in on whether or not it's a good idea for our political leaders to give foreign actors an opportunity to speak to the American people directly. And part of the reason why I wanted to ask that question was because it seems like when there's an opportunity to speak to people directly, more often than not, it's a photo op or an opportunity to demagogue people. Plain as that. And so why in the world should we why should we open that forum to foreigners to demagogue U.S. citizens? We already have enough of that going on right now in our current political system. So that's how I I did try to frame it more thoughtfully by asking, well, yes, we should have a global perspective. Foreigners, the options were having a global perspective. Foreigners shouldn't demagogue U.S. citizens, or something else. And, I don't think I voted in this poll, but my opinion would be that, no, I don't think foreigners should. Maybe they could write a letter in the newspaper so that we could read it and think about it. Perhaps that would be nice. But the people said, well, yes, in some circumstances, Churchill spoke before Congress, And so I think that was all right. There's some other good times where it could be okay. Another gentleman mentioned we have the internet news already. They can make their messages heard from phone. Doesn't need to be state sponsored. I think that's something that not enough people think about. We had to pay some way, shape, or form, either through time, direct cost, to have Zelensky come to the United States. Why? Why? How often do we have to pay for these other people? Does it have to be a 24-hour thing all the time? We always have to pay for foreign nations while we have to go broke at home. So it starts to get a little absurd. Another gentleman mentions, well, if we bring the world leader in, then we can at least hear directly what their point of view is. And I guess that's good, but it's not like they're going to be having a candid conversation with us. It's not like Zelensky sitting down at a podcast that's totally unscripted, that a comms team didn't write something for it. No, politicians already probably knew what it was that he was going to say. Heck, who knows? Perhaps they even wrote some of the message for him. And then he delivered that speech. So, well, I don't think it was a good idea. I don't think that we should have it, but the people mostly agreed with some slight disagreement. Now here we get to the meat and potatoes of our conversation. The whole thing that I wanted to really talk about today was foreign policy, because I really don't think that most people have any understanding of what's going on in terms of foreign policy. Most of us are left in the dark about what's going on overseas, how many military bases we have in the world, how much spending is going on. It's crazy. Yeah, Chad, I agree with you, Chad. We spend so much on other countries, and so many of our own people here are suffering in many different ways. Yeah, it's exactly right. And every time that we spend overseas, which the war in Ukraine is just a fraction of what it is that we spend overseas, and we've given historically in the past a ton of foreign aid that really just props up regimes of foreign dictators. Isn't that crazy? Well, we have to do that because if we don't, we're afraid of something being destabilized. We don't know what would happen. So we have to fund these foreign warlords. We have to pledge money, for example, to support nations in Africa that have dictators. We have to do it. If we don't, there's going to be some big evil monster. I was talking to somebody on Twitter, and they basically said, if we do not fund Ukraine, if we don't provide this $45 billion, then it's genocide. Okay, you either have to spend money or it's genocide. Well, really? This same gentleman was complaining about the lack of imagination in politics. What are you talking about? Okay, you're thinking in binary terms, either $45 billion or nothing's gonna, or it's gonna be genocide. What are you talking about, man? There couldn't be anything less imaginative than saying, "No, we got to give them billions of dollars, or else Hitler's going to come back. They're going to wipe out Europe. This, that." No, that's a perverted fantasy of some other time past. But most of us really do believe that this is true. If Donald Trump were president, do you believe he'd be portrayed as a warmonger for funding Ukraine? Most people said yes. One person said no, and another person mentioned there would be no war. I'm going to try to cast my vote here, but it obviously won't let me. I am not totally sure. I posed this question because I initially thought that it would be certain that the media would most definitely portray Trump as a warmonger. And they would try to make it seem like Donald Trump is marching on for the fight of all that's evil and bad about the United States. But then I thought about it some more, and I don't know. They might praise him for attacking Putin. I don't know. It's actually the whole Russia saga, which we'll cover later tonight, is actually a lot more interesting than what they're talking about in the media. There's so much that's gone on in just the last 30 years. A lot of people have really lost track. Dustin said, well, no, this is what the deep state would want. So therefore, they wouldn't blame it on Trump, although he hopes that Trump would be searching for some sort of end. That's what I think that we should be looking for. I hope that that's what happens, but it's not clear that anybody, the Washington foreign policy establishment, is what it is that's what they want. For all we know, we do know that they are plotting more war. That's why the defense budget has to increase every single year. We need more bombs, more weapons, more of this, more of that. And meanwhile, all the government programs we're forced upon have to go bankrupt. Mr. Osmond says if Trump were president, there would be no war to fund. I think there's a possibility that's true. That's not unequivocally true. We just don't know. We just don't know. I think there's a chance that there would be no war. I also think there's a chance that Trump would be portrayed as a warmonger if they could really get that narrative going. They'd probably try it out on CNN as a trial plan. Let's see if we can portray Trump as a dictator by funding endless wars. It's possible. The last that we have in our Post the People public discussion in our Talk Politics group, and heck, go ahead and join. All you got to do is type in Talk Politics right into Facebook. You can join the group and participate. A friend of mine, her name's Liz, she mentioned she ran for Congress against Fred Keller, who I helped get elected back when I used to live in Potter County in the conferee process. She either did run against Fred or wanted to run against Fred as a libertarian. And I like a lot of the stuff that Liz does. Hey, no, just happy to have you here. We're just covering what it was that the people were talking about. And one of my friends who wanted to run for Congress and is a great lady mentioned in our Talk Politics group that we need to reform Congress, but with all the money flowing from lobbyists influencing our representatives in both subtle and not so subtle ways, how do we move the needle? She asked for thoughts. And well, there's a lot to think about because one, we have to ask, well, do we really need to reform Congress? How much money is flowing in from lobbyists? Do lobbyists actually influence anybody in subtle and not so subtle ways? There's some evidence that suggests that lobbyists really don't have much success, although perhaps that's debatable. And then there was a question of moving the needle. Our friend here mentions, well, theoretically, regulation on lobbyists could work, but will never happen. Well, I think Obama tried to make sure that lobbyists wouldn't have so much influence in Congress. And I think influence on members of Congress. I think what happened was that people who were previously lobbyists just changed their name to something else. So it's not like you can outright ban it. In fact, outright bans on anything don't work. You can't just get rid of lobbyists or alcohol or cannabis just by banning it. It just makes it go, makes things less transparent and therefore less able to be policed. What I mentioned was, hey, I am actually technically a lobbyist, and I know that as a lobbyist, I provide important info to consider for them to consider whether they before they decide to vote for a bill or not. But I do think that lobbying is a problem when people are lobbying for more regulations on a certain industry or for money. We're not trying to get more money, and we're not trying to regulate other businesses out of existence. I think that's problematic. I think those lobbyists are bad. I don't think there's any legal constitutional way to regulate them anyhow. But she mentions, I mentioned, well, to be more effective in exposing those who do insist on lobbying for more money and regulation, I'm trying to create a better space for political conversation. So I think if there was more political conversation, if people insisted on knowing what it is that's going on, if people were committed to learning about their government and what does go on behind the scenes, then we wouldn't have to ask for more bans on lobbyists to start with, because people would know what's going on. There's sort of a speech void that exists when people don't speak for themselves, and that's filled with lobbyists. that's filled with lobbyists, former politicians, lawyers, people with money, the whole special interest gamut. That all exists because people aren't finding out what's going on, identifying the problems, and policing their government. That's the whole purpose behind we the people. Yes, they are supposed to represent us, we the people, but we the people are supposed to represent ourselves by knowing what's going on. That's our duty, fundamentally. And I think if we were able to step up as free people, then maybe we wouldn't view lobbyists as such a threat that we tend to do today, as sort of a scapegoat of sorts. And the last thing that, well, and that's it. We just welcomed our new members into our Talk Politics group. So that's the pulse of the people. That's what's going on out there. That's what the people think. So we will move on to national news and other nonsense. Trying to figure out what's going on in this crazy national political scene. So, hey, speaking of national news, that brings us to the big topic here tonight. And that brings us to war is sacred. Well, that was something of a paraphrase on my part, and I guess I'm kind of surprised Facebook hasn't flagged it as fake news, although I wouldn't be surprised with the release of the Twitter files to see the FBI, flag it as illegal news or illegal commentary that has to be banned. But here's what our president says. He says, we have a lot of obligations as Americans, but we have only one sacred obligation: to prepare those we send to war and care for them and their families when they come home. Okay. We have a lot of obligations as Americans, but we have only one sacred obligation: to prepare those we send to war and care for them and their families when they come home. That's what our presidents are saying now. Okay. If this was Donald Trump, 1000% this quotation would be taken to mean Donald Trump is a warmonger. But in addition to that, if you look at this statement, this isn't really just one thing. Preparing people for war, that's one thing. Caring for them is another. And caring for their families is a third thing. It's another bit of jargon by the Biden administration that doesn't make any sense, but he's saying this right before, while there's a major war between Russia and Ukraine. Why is he saying this? And does he not understand that this can be taken to mean, well, we have to fulfill our sacred obligation to defeat the Russians, so we're just going to send your kids off to war. Does he care about that? Does he think about it? Well, actually, as it turns out, a lot of this comes from another speech that he gave. It was during a town hall in Newcastle, Delaware. So apparently what his team does is they will, he'll give a big speech and then they'll crib that for social media. So this is part of his speech. And what he's saying is, which even this is hard to follow. Let's get more context here and dive in. It says, and and we have my colleagues heard me say this for a long time. Boy, this is weird. And we have my colleagues have heard me say this for a long time. I wonder why he's saying it for a long time. So the sacred obligation, and he says, we have one sacred obligation: prepare those to send for war and to care for them and their families when they come home from war. And I mean that. And I know my colleagues mean that from the bottom of our heart. Well, his colleagues have been saying it. I know my colleagues mean that from the bottom of our heart. Oh, gee whiz. Most of your colleagues, most of the people have been perpetuating all kinds of war overseas without other people knowing. We have a commenter here. I wonder why Biden thinks he can dictate what is sacred or not. Don't think that's up to him. Well, I don't think. No, I think in this case, he's trying to address this to a military audience. But even then, does he think that they're not listening? Is he trying to rile these guys up for war? Very, very strange. And then he says, look, later in the speech, well, the reason why war is sacred. And then I called Dennis, who I work with, and then he said, well, I'm going to work for the VA. And then he said, well, my husband, my son, my daughter's really in trouble. She's got to come in, got us here. Well, she'll be able to come in 10 days for 2 weeks. He said, and then he goes on to say, well, hey, Dennis, can we fix all these people dying from suicide? Well, and in this speech, they don't even get, he doesn't even give an answer. Hey, can we fix the problem of suicide? Well, we reach out to doctors and nurses, and there's a lot of good people there. So that's what's going on. But it's shocking. It's shocking then that he would even say that. And heck, if you want, go ahead and read this speech and remark on that. I don't think it makes a lick of sense. But hey, I'll let you guys decide. So we have our president saying, well, war is sacred. And then I called up my friends and asked them, I said, hey, can you fix suicide? And he said, well, there's a bunch of good nurses. Okay, so he's signing off the wall, stuff like that. And in the meantime, Washington, D.C. is having a party. The 31st anniversary of the armed forces of Ukraine. Oh, golly gee whiz. Raytheon, the Lockheed Martin, Ukraine house. Ukraine itself. Hey, we're gonna have a big party about the war. Whoops. This will be really cool, man. Hey, come out and party with us over as we discuss our plans to bomb Ukraine. Have a cocktail or two. It'll be really cool. And at this event was Raytheon CEO Greg Haynes, who described a significant global demand for advanced air defense systems, especially in Eastern Europe, as the Russians and Ukraine conflict unfortunately continues. Yeah, man, this war stinks. I hate going to war, but I happen to be in DC. You guys want to hang out? Hey, I'm a weapons contractor. I'm selling $50 billion worth of weapons. Come to my cocktail party. It'll be the bomb. I mean, how in the world is this able to happen? You know, we're having companies just come out and publicly celebrate war. Hey, we're selling a record number of bombs. Boy, desperate times. In addition to that, so part of the picture that I wanted to paint here was that this idea that we have a president that says that we should go to war. We're having defense contractors celebrate the war. And then we have something like the World Trade Organization that the US set up to negotiate trade disputes with other countries. And the US is violating those trade rules, particularly on steel and aluminum tariffs. In the picture that I'm trying to paint here is that where it seems like everybody is benefiting from the war in the DC establishment, but we're also neglecting other potential allies by not following the rules that we set up for them. And so what I'm trying to get at is, how are we going to be able to partner with other nations when, you know, we're having cocktail parties about war, we're having our leaders say, well, war is sacred, and then we're also violating trade rules. You know, how is that not going to further escalate tensions? You know, that's something that we really ought to be asking here is, all this conflict's going on, people are cheering for war, but the United States is alienating economic partners and alienating people that wanted to partner with us by not following the trade rules that we set up. And it's upsetting other European nations. Here's one gentleman says the US's reaction to simply rejecting the ruling is incomprehensible, said Bern Long, who chairs the European Parliament's International Trade Committee. We have to have an honest discussion with the US if they're moving away from rules-based trading, and if and how we can rescue the existing system. Boy, I'm sure that's going to make Europe feel really, really good. You know, we probably escalated a war with Russia and Ukraine and probably helped prolong that. And then we're not following the trade rules that we set up, some of which is going to come at the expense of Europe. You know, what are they going to think about that? Do you think, if there is such a thing as the rise of China, that all these countries that we've alienated through endless war are going to be eager to rush to our side and say, yeah, you've been such a great trade partner, we're going to help you out? Do you really think that? I don't. You know, we put tariffs on the EU, probably illegal, or probably violated some agreement. It never seems to end. And then meanwhile, We're having a guy come to the U.S. to give this big speech, and then Russia says there's no chance of Ukraine talks as Zelensky comes to Washington. Now, if this doesn't paint the picture that this is making things worse, I don't know what is. It says the supply of weapons continues and the range of supplied weapons is expanding. All of this, of course, leads to an aggravation of the conflict. How long do we have to have this aggravated conflict for? And who is it benefiting? Other than the cocktail defense contractors. And why aren't they covering this on the news? Why don't Fox News, CNN, NPR say, well, hey, this is a major problem. We're alienating foreign countries and we're prolonging the war. Isn't this bad? I thought in the 60s and 70s, these guys were against war. But now it's okay. Now it's okay because we hate Russia. And see, here's what's really, really interesting. I came across this book as I was trying to figure out more about the history of Russia. See, back in I want to say 96. Back in 96, we helped elect the guy that appointed Putin to the position that he's in. We helped him get an IMF loan that he could use to fund his reelection, perhaps in violation of Russia's campaign finance laws, in part because of people like Bill Clinton. So back in 2000, you had Republicans saying, well, the real reason why Russia is corrupt is because of Bill Clinton. Because if you remember, following the Cold War, the USSR essentially collapsed and they were looking for allies and partners. The United States was willing to become one of those partners, and Russians were looking forward to partnering with the US. Holy heck. And so what happened was Bill Clinton and Al Gore and Larry Summers were the group of people that were giving Russia advice. Which so therefore this whole problem of Russia now should have been dealt with back in or no, forgive me, 92. I said 96 before, I meant 92. This could have been dealt with back in 1992. Russia wanted to be an ally with us. Now, once the Clinton administration was working with Russia, it actually collapsed their economy in 98. Bill Clinton and his advisors collapsed the Russian economy back in 1998. So how then are we supposed to expect Russia to be friendly with us? We destroyed their economy in 98. And heck, check this out. Can we blame Larry Summers? This is one of the guys Bill Clinton had work on the Russia economy. This guy, Dean Baker, says yes. So when the Russia economy fell after the Cold War, it was looking to rebuild and to have its assets privatized by people like Larry Summers and Al Gore, who were going to provide advice. And what happened is the advice that Bill Clinton's government gave them led to a collapse. And if you look at this link here, you have somebody like Larry Summers bragging about what he did to help Russia. when actually he really didn't help Russia at all. The conclusion is, if that's the case, then by Summers' own standard, surely we can hold Mr. Summers accountable for the devastation that Russia's transition inflicted on people in the 1990s. Okay, so we interfered in their economy back in the 90s. And we never did anything to address that fact. And now we're supposed to believe that they're going to be allies, then that they're going to be friends. Actually, what it is that I think that's going on is that Democrats like Joe Biden, who were probably friends with Bill Clinton, Summers, and all these other people who gave advice to Russia, wants to destroy Russia, because probably he's upset that all his friends look bad for collapsing their economy. To improve his presidential ratings, so that way, well, Joe Biden's destroying Russia, those are bad guys, that's going to help my ratings. You know, this is reason to really be skeptical, okay, of Russia being the bad guy when we destroyed their economy. And I believe revenge is a serious motive. And moreover, hey, if we can destroy Russia, that's a great thing, because they rigged our election. Even though we actually rigged theirs when we helped this gentleman named Yeltsin get elected. We rigged Russia's election. Hey, but that's okay. It's okay, because Democrats are the party of peace and love. So, check it out. Check out this report, Russia's Road to Corruption. No, it's bizarre that Republicans aren't holding the Biden administration accountable, or Democrats accountable for this, or why they're not saying, well, if we would have helped Russia become a free market economy, we wouldn't have this problem. I guess they either don't pay attention to what's going on, or they don't care about the economy, I guess. So that's that. More national nonsense. We have the $1.7 trillion spending package that came out. Well, most people didn't pay attention to this because they were at home celebrating the holidays, and hey, that's great. It's good that people are out there being with their family. But it should be more disgusting that politicians are engaging in spending bills that do things like prohibiting funding to improve border security, and then giving away $410 million for border security for Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Tunisia, and Oman. And then, of course, we have to spend the money to be in the UN and pay $65 million for salmon, money for international fisheries, family planning, and heck, $65 million for a senator, and we get to name a federal building after Nancy Pelosi. So our tax dollars have to be spent so we can name federal buildings after politicians. When does the vanity project stop? I don't think anybody said, hey, naming buildings after yourself as if you were a god or a goddess, that's what represents me. That's what it is that I need. I need $3.6 million for the Michelle Obama trip. because goodness knows nobody knows who Michelle Obama is. We need to have a trail after her so people can walk with Obama forever in peace and love. When does that end? You know, these people say, well, we don't have time to read the bill. Well, you have time to put all this crap in it. How can you have time to put all this crap in it but not read the bill? How does that happen? And heck, how does everybody have so much stuff in this bill to start with? This does not even make any sense. It makes no sense. And then we have to rename 25 separate post offices. So we can't figure out any problems, but we have to rename our post offices. So that's what's going on out there. People saying that they don't have time to read bills, but they have time to put all this stuff into it. The same people that urge for all this spending, they're actually competing to work for jobs in the executive branch. This one lady who apparently secured $37 billion for defense spending is now going to be a national security expert. So if you can convince taxpayers to give up $37 billion, now you're an expert. Now you get to work in national security, as if national security is just shoveling around a bunch of people's money. That could be you. And well, then we got two other stories here. The Twitter's new ownership, they've complained about Twitter being censored by the FBI or the military, but it's not clear what they're actually going to do about it. And then it's not clear that the Ukraine war will end because Ukraine wants all of the land back, including Crimea, and Russia wants more land. And they're both trying to get the most from each other without actually coming to the table. So expect high gas prices and more money to be spent on war. And as one commenter mentioned, they don't understand what is going on and seen at war. Only those who went through it can understand. And that's exactly right. Politicians will never understand. Apparently, they're not even trying to. Instead, they're trying to find out ways to spend your money so they can get a promotion. Hey, if I spend $60 billion, Joe Biden's gonna love me, and I'll get to play security expert because I spent all this money. Absolutely demented. So that's what we got for national news and nonsense. Certainly just as much nonsense as there was news this week. But let's get to a little bit of commentary. So let's go back to the whole episode, the whole idea of the episode. Joe Biden says war is sacred. And is it though? With the United States having hundreds of military bases on every country, why? What is sacred about it? Where is the reverence? What about war is sacred? Because if it was sacred, wouldn't we take the lives of our soldiers more seriously than having hundreds of bases on every continent in every country. If war was sacred, wouldn't our president be encouraging people to, I don't know, not be involved in it because of the sacredness of the lives involved? You know, and with that rhetoric, imagine where we will be in the future. Joe Biden gets away with it because, oh, he's an older guy. He doesn't know what it is that he's saying. Well, I'm afraid that darker days are ahead, and I fear that more politicians are going to say more extreme things to get more approval. You see, the whole idea that war is sacred is driven by increasing disgust and contempt for the president and members of Congress. And so if they're able to get people to worship war and convince them it's sacred, then if we go to war, then they're doing the sacred, holy thing. And then they can be esteemed as if they are the true disciple of Christ or God or any other religious deity program out there. You see, that's what it's about. Worship. Okay, it's not about the lives of our soldiers. It's not about national interest. It's about worship. To me, that's the minute. You know, the increasing piety of politicians comes at a time where most people proclaim to be atheists, and yet they go home, turn on the TV, and get a sermon from a man who says war is sacred. We have more politicians than ever before standing on a pedestal and proclaiming themselves to be some sort of savior. Well, what happened to God? Why can't God be people's savior instead of politicians? Ask yourself that. And ask yourself, how are these politicians coming to be more and more praised as times get worse and worse? By actually stepping on all that's sacred. By stepping on all that's sacred, politicians are then able to convince the population that only they and their agenda is worthy of worship. And well, there is no solution other than church. But at the same time, we can't let these same politicians continually demagogue the people. You see, it's this demagoguery that allows politicians like Joe Biden to declare war as sacred and to create the pedestal by which he can convince people to worship at the altar of statism. You see, only through direct contact with the people can politicians hollow out what is sacred: our churches, our homes, and our families, and convince people to abandon those in favor of the DC elite. And so really, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to you. Will you participate in allowing politicians to demagogue you, to tell you that war is sacred, to tell you, well, hey, we must worship Joe Biden, we must worship Nancy Pelosi, we must create a Michelle Obama holy sacred trail that maybe you could walk on? It's up to you. I'm doing all that I can here at Talk Politics to get us headed in a different direction. And if you want to help our mission of creating independent media where people can have conversations instead of presidential prayer sessions where we pretend to worship Joe Biden for starting war, donate at ko-fi.com/Reichenbach Media. I can't do it without the help of you. And without donations, we will never be able to tackle the powers that be. The people who want to sermonize us, convince us that war is sacred, will have no independent media at all. And that's our commentary. Next up, we got politics, Pennsylvania. Just kidding. There really is no politics here in Pennsylvania. As it stands now, we have a divided U.S. House, which isn't going to be able to be resolved presumably anytime soon. Republicans have a numerical majority of 101 to 99, but Democrats have two people that were appointed to federal positions, or one federal positions, and one person who stepped away, giving them a different sort of majority, if you will, of 102. So they're still trying to adjudicate what counts as a majority in Pennsylvania. We simply don't know. I think the math of 101 would be adequate enough, but I am no lawyer. Furthermore, what's really at stake here is that Republicans may try to pass a constitutional amendment with their 101 majority that would increase their power to eliminate regulation here in the Commonwealth, and then to also pass a voter ID law. So that is that. And that's all we got. Hey, join us every Tuesday at 8:30. And join our group Talk Politics, where you don't just watch the news, but can actually help make it. Every Tuesday, we'll have this conversation amongst friends about politics. Same time, same place, every time, all the time on Tuesday at 8:30. In the meantime, well, we're just going to be out there trying to get back at a world that's always trying to get back at us with high taxes, political sermons, a bunch of other wacky nonsense. Hey, great to hear from you. And we'll keep it rolling for next week. Till next time.